Okay. Welcome to the January 2023 edition of the Invictus Office Hour, where we answer all of your fitness, educate, or exercise, nutrition, mindset, lifestyle questions with little to no sarcasm, but I can't promise that. Today we have Christine on. Thanks for joining us today, Christine. So let's get into it. Since you're the one on, do you want to start with your question? Go for it. Ask me your question.
Oh my gosh, I have to look it up. Okay, so my question was I know I want to know what kind of different cardio there is, because as I'm going through my workout and wanting to lose body fat more than weight and everything, I always feel like when I'm working out, the only cardio that's going to be any good for me is either riding the bike, doing the rower, or running. And I know that there's different types of cardio, so I wanted you to explain how we do it and what are the different kinds. Are there some that are better than others, or does it depend on what it is we want to accomplish in our goals?
So there's a couple of things that I'll need to clarify so that I understand what you're saying, because from what it sounds like, you're asking me what different types of modalities of cardio, right? Because you mentioned bike, rower. Those are modalities. Those aren't types of cardio. Those are just particular modes, right? Those are, I'm going to run, I'm going to ride a bike, I'm going to row. Those are like the equipment or the modality. So is that what you're asking? Like, is it better to row or run or ride the bike for fat loss?
That is part of the question. And the other is, are there other types of cardio that we can do to stay on the program? Because like with myself, I can't go out and run right now.
Sure.
So what can I do cardio wise to get, the heart rate up? Whereas, because cardio, when I was doing it before and running, the cardio, I was better losing the body fat, losing the weight, because I was more active, because I was doing the cardio. Is there other things that we can do because we can't run that would give us the same results?
All right, so that's a nuanced question. There's a lot of different there's a lot of different it depends that goes into that, right? So if you're asking, like, are there other modalities that you could do besides running? Absolutely, right? Riding a bike, rowing, kettlebell swings, jump rope, walking, skipping, swimming. Those are a tons of different modalities that you can do other than running. However, just you were losing weight or body fat faster than, not specifically because you were running, but it was because you were more active. So when it comes to activity, right, it's important to differentiate. Like when you say cardio, cardio isn't just a specific modality, right? Like you can do you can do weight training in a way that produces a cardiovascular effect. So when you say different types, so what I immediately think of is what kind of energy systems, or what is the fuel that's being used by the body primarily during cardio. And that comes back to intensity. And when we talk about intensity, it's about, in cardiovascular terms, it's about a percentage of max heart rate. Now, max heart rate is, again, something that is hotly debated, right? The easy way to kind of estimate your max heart rate is 220 minus your age. It's not super accurate, but it is an estimate to start from and to give you an idea. Now, the problem with only using heart rate is heart rate doesn't take into consideration fuel system or energy system utilization, right? And when we talk about energy, there's 3 pathways that your body can use to create energy when you are doing everything, but especially when you exercise. So the first and fastest is what's called creatine, right? Everybody's heard of the supplement creatine. So you have creatine in your muscles currently. It's in the form of what's called phosphocreatine. It's stored there. In the first few seconds of anything that you do, is creatine. So the first couple of reps of a strength training exercise is going to be creatine. The first few steps of a run, the first few pulls of a rower are going to be all creatine, or primarily creatine, that's being used to generate ATP for energy. The next system that it then starts to switch into is what's called glycolysis, or in the fuel is glycogen or carbohydrates. And you store carbohydrates, you store glycogen in your muscles and in your liver, right? And at higher intensities, your body is going to burn more carbohydrates, right? So creatine only lasts for so long. It only lasts a few seconds. If you supplement with creatine, it lasts a couple of extra seconds, but it doesn't last more than 4 or 5 seconds, maybe 10 seconds at the most. Then the fuel system switches over to primarily glycogen or carbohydrates. And then depending on the length of time that you're going, the fuel system then starts to shift to primarily fat for a fuel source. And that's the third system. It's known as the slow oxidative system, meaning that oxygen is required for the creation of energy with fat. And that's done in the mitochondria of the muscle, which is a little like what's called it's a cell, but it's not like a specific muscle cell. It's a cell within the cell that is called the mitochondria, and that's where your body takes fat and it pushes it into the mitochondria, and it uses something called acetylcholine A, and it creates ATP, and that's what you use for energy. So again, the length of time is going to dictate a lot of times what energy system you're using. So when at Invictus, we talk about sustained cardio, we talk about gain, we talk about pain, right? Those are the 3 forms of conditioning that we do. So sustain is it's exactly what it sounds like. We want to sustain that over a period of time. That's primarily low intensity, meaning that you're not going to be at a high percentage of your max heart rate. And the goal is to use primarily fat as a fuel source. That's the energy system we're trying to utilize, and we're trying to make our body better at using fat as a fuel source. Oh, look at that. Another person in a car. Cool. Hi, Renee. A gain workout is more of a moderate intensity interval. And what we're going to do is push the intensity level up to where we are just to the point where we kind of stop burning fat and we're burning almost all carbohydrates, right? The intention of a gain workout is to increase our threshold so that we can exercise at higher levels and still use more fat as a fuel source. Fat is the most efficient, most abundant fuel source our body has, right? We have tens of thousands of calories worth of fat stored on our body. Even super lean people have a lot of fat, a lot more energy stored in fat than you do in carbohydrates or anything else. Gain workouts aren't usually very fun, right? They're the ones that are a little bit longer intervals. You're working at a little bit higher intensity. They're not you're sucking wind usually. They're not fun workouts. They're kind of they're not fun. That's the best way to put it. And then then pain workouts are the high intensity ones, right? That's where we're going at max effort. So our intensity level should be the highest, right? We're trying to max out our effort. And from a fuel energy system, we're going to be burning all glycogen at that point. We're not burning any carbohydrates. We've burned through our phosphocreatine. So we're burning all carbohydrates. And the intention of that is to push our VO2 max, right? VO2 is the amount of oxygen that you can take in per minute per kilogram of body weight, right? So you've all heard of like Lance Armstrong had this ridiculous VO2 max of like 92. It's like inhuman. He was also on performance enhancing drugs, but he also has a heart that's a third size bigger than the average human. So he can push more blood that has more oxygen in it than the average human can. So VO2 is a measure of just cardiovascular efficiency and power, right? It's a great measure of health from that perspective. The higher your VO2, the more oxygen you can push through your bloodstream. The more oxygen you can push through the bloodstream, the more fat you can use for a fuel source. The more fat you can use as a fuel source, the farther and the harder you're able to go. Does that make sense? Okay. So
yes. Thank you.
So that's a long way to answer your question, because there's not like a simple answer. There very rarely is in exercise science or in what we do. There's, anything. Kettlebell swings can be done in a sustained workout. They could be done in a pain workout. They could be done in a gain workout. A rower could be done the same way, right? So it's about making sure that we're getting the right amount of the different types of conditioning exercises to elicit the response that we're trying to get from our body based off of our goals.
Okay. And because thank you, Josh, that was wonderful. I wrote a lot down. I was wondering because, I probably read too much, but as my goals are always losing body fat percent, and they're saying you have to do like 30 minutes of cardio and you have to be running this much, or you have to doing this and this and this much. And that's why I was like, well, I can't do that right now because I can't run. So am I doing the right kind of cardio? If I'm not losing body fat, maybe I'm not doing it right. So that's why I wanted you to answer. What else can I do?
Cardio is not the only way to lose fat.
I understand that. I understand. And I know that now, but I still read what are the steps for me to get there. Sometimes I just
you
did not.
You 100% need to stop reading that stuff.
Yes.
I mean that, not to go off on a tangent, but there's so many different pieces of content that are out there that every, pardon my French, dipshit thinks that they have the answer to everybody's problem, and it's not as simple as do cardio for 30 minutes or run or ride this bike or do this, right? Like there's no one size fits all answer to anybody's problem. Everybody is a little bit different, and you have to take into consideration a number of factors, not just physiology, which for the most part we all operate the same way internally, but the big differences come from lifestyle, right? And that's where people they don't take that stuff into consideration. They don't think about how one person's lifestyle is and how that can dictate their results based off of their time availability, their, the stress levels that they're under, all of the resources they have available to them versus somebody else, right? So it's not like just do this program and this is going to be successful for everybody. There's a lot of nuance that goes into all that stuff. All right. Any other parts of that, Christine? You're driving now, so don't crash.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to crash, but I have had to have Kamal and you hit me over the head with that exact program saying that you just said. So now I know. Thank you.
And we will continue to hit you over the head as often as you need in order for that to sink in. Okay. Mary, you were on next. Do you have a question for me?
I actually do, but I don't know how to ask it.
Why?
Because I don't quite understand it myself enough to even come, but I'll try. So, I have my Aura ring, and it's helping me understand my sleep and my readiness and everything.
Yeah.
And so my heart rate variability is affecting my readiness score.
Yeah.
And so I guess I just want you to introduce me to heart rate variability. Just tell me about it. What is it? How do I?
It's funny that you ask me this. So
okay.
I have written a couple of articles about heart rate variability that I've been paid for from NASM. And then I was recently on the NASM podcast, and they were asking me about heart rate variability and how to make it work for the average everyday person. So I happen to know a little bit about HRV.
Okay, perfect.
So here's some background on heart rate variability. It was invented in the 50s, right? And it was the only form of bio data that could be transmitted down to the Earth in the space program in the 50s and 60s. So it became very well researched, or started to become very well researched back then. Heart rate variability is literally the amount of time between your R interval on an EKG. So if everybody knows you've seen the picture of an EKG, right? Like the QRS, right? So Q, something like that. The R is the top one, right? Where it goes up high. So it's the difference between that. And that's essentially your heart rate is the amount of time between the R part of the EKG signal. Now, where the variability comes in is what we're looking at is how variable that is from day to day. And the idea being that you want low variability. You want it to be relatively similar from day to day. The more variable it is, the more it changes, the more that something your body is dealing with something. Either it's dealing with like an overabundance of stress, or it's overcompensating and it's like activating your parasympathetic nervous system too much. Now, here's the fun thing about HRV. For people who are active, who are working out like you guys do, your HRV should never be the same. It's not going to be perfect every day. You want to have some days where your HRV is a little bit higher, because that means that your body is, you actually pushed it a little bit. You've trained hard. Your body has to recover from that training, right? So again, remember, HRV is looking at stress. Let me go back. So HRV looks at stress. Your heart rate is a manifestation of stress, right? So when you are in a when you experience stress, and stress doesn't just mean like mental stress, like when your kids aren't doing what they're supposed to do and you're stressed out, or you're supposed to hit a sales deadline at the end of the month, or anything like that. It's not just mental stress. There are 4 different kinds of stresses. So mental is one of them, and that's the one that most people think about. But then you've got physical stress, right? Exercise is a physical stress that you put on the body. It's a positive physical stress. Ideally, you're going to have a positive adaptation from that exercise, but it's still stress that your body has to recover from. Does that make sense? Okay. Third, you have emotional stress, right? Your husband's being a jerk to you and you're stressed out about it, or you're just dealing with a death in the family, or anything that would affect you emotionally. That's a different form of stress, but it's still stress. And then lastly, you've got environmental stresses, and those are like food sensitivities, toxins in the air or in the food that you eat. It could be an injury that you've sustained. It could be that you have some form of systemic inflammation that's causing your cortisol levels to go up, and that's stress on the body. Now, the interesting thing is your body responds to stress the same way, regardless of the form that it comes in. So whether you're driving in the car and somebody cuts you off and you have to slam on the brakes so you don't rear end them, or you're running, sprint intervals, your body is going to respond to stress the same way. So when we're looking at HRV, all we're looking at is the ability to recover from all forms of stress. So that being said, all other things that say that we're keeping them, and we're keeping them equal in terms of our lifestyle is good, we're minimizing or managing our emotional and mental stress, we don't have any food sensitivities, we're getting good sleep, we're drinking lots of water, we're eating good, healthy, organic foods. The only real major stress that you're adding to your life is your exercise or your training. Then ideally, if depending on your training program, you should have days where your HRV spikes a little bit because you trained hard the day before and your body needs to recover. And you should have days that it goes down a little bit because, that might be a rest day and your body's extra recovered, right? So a readiness score is nothing more than just giving you some guidance on how hard you should or shouldn't push yourself for that particular day. You shouldn't take it as a gospel or an end all be all, or if it says that my readiness score is low, that I shouldn't work out at all. It might just mean that you need to back off on the intensity. It might mean that you need to increase your rest periods a little bit. It might mean that you reduce the overall volume of work that you're going to do in that training session for that day. Does that make sense? Or better sense?
Yeah, it does. So there's really not a lot you know, like as long as I'm managing the stresses that I can manage, if it's still variable.
Yeah, I mean, then you start to look at, well, again, you have to look at a trend over time. Looking at just 2 days, doesn't really tell you much. But if you're trending where your variability is really high for a long period of time, that's going to affect your readiness score every single day. So then you have to start looking at what's causing your body to be in that state of stress for so long, right? For you, I mean, you've been working on a thesis, you're up late at night, you've got your 2 kids and your husband, which is a 3rd kid. You've got lacrosse season is coming up, so you're training extra hard, or you're playing extra, plus you're coming in here, you have to deal with Kamal on a daily basis. I mean, you've got a lot of things that are affecting you stress wise.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, you can only do so much, right? But you got to be careful. I guess what we use that for is eventually something will break. Eventually you're going to get sick. Eventually you're going to get injured. If you're redlining your car all the time, eventually the engine is going to stop working. Right? And it's the same thing with our human body, right? If we are going and going and going and going and going, and we're maxing out on our stress levels all the time, eventually our bodies are going to be like, yeah, screw you, buddy. We're going to now force you to take a break.
Okay, so with my HRV score that I do get, it does look at it over time, and it's been several years that it's been tracking it. And so seeing that it's variable, because some days it's 30 and some days it's 50.
Yeah.
And when I'm looking at everything as a whole, it really could just be that it's my workout. Some days are just harder than others, and taking everything in, it may not be a concern if that's the case.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. What would help you is then to start, like, again, tracking it or writing it down, like write down what your HRV score is the day after different types of workouts. And you might be able to start to even predict what's going to happen to your HRV based off of the training that you're doing.
Okay. That's interesting, because I bet I could go back, because it tracks your HRV, but it also tracks your activity. So I bet I could go back and look at it compared to the activity for the day before or something.
And it also tracks sleep. So you could probably, I mean, there's multiple variables that you could probably look at and start to even create like a spreadsheet over and maybe even create some, like, a predictive model, right? And get all nuts with it.
Yeah. I bet I could even download the data into the spreadsheet and have it do it for me.
You probably can.
Okay. Thank you.
Hey, Josh, remember when we used to have those heart monitors? Is that anything that, I mean, and then we stopped using those, and is obviously what Mary's doing is much better, those rings and stuff, or are the heart monitors still good for those?
Well,
they don't monitor your sleep and all that stuff. Like,
no, so it's measuring 2 different things, right? Like, it's measuring her heart rate, but it's doing it through the ring. And the way it measures it is it sends like infrared light through the skin, and it measures the color of the hemoglobin in the blood. And based off of that, it's able to interpret or estimate what your heart rate is. It's not really good for like activity from like understanding what your heart rate is. Like, that's where the chest straps are the most accurate. Like my watch does the same thing. Like, I get my heart rate in real time all the time. Because my watch has got the lights on the bottom, right? It's always looking at my heart rate through my skin, but it's not super accurate when it comes to like interval work or things like that. It's a little bit less accurate. So it's measuring something different. And what Christine is referring to is, in the gym years ago, we used to have a TV on the wall, and everybody wore a heart rate strap, and we would display what their heart rate was during the training sessions. We stopped doing that a while ago for a number of reasons, and I don't have enough time to get into all the reasons why.
I don't know if this makes a difference either, but from what it appears to me is it is only tracking the heart rate variability in my sleep.
Well,
So
it looks at your heart rate first thing in the morning or at a certain time, and it'll track it for a period, right? It'll track it for 3 or 4 minutes, and then it's going to look at that on a daily basis. So it plugs it into the algorithm and it figures it out over time.
yeah, well, but I think that it does that, but at night. So from like 10 p.m. to 5:30 p.m. and then it gives me my average heart rate variability from
Right.
from that time.
Yeah, I mean, we can
Because,
probably look it up and find out exactly how it works and when they measure it.
yeah. Okay, well, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, Renee, your turn. What's up?
I just came on to see what was going on.
Oh, you don't have any questions? I know
Okay.
you asked one.
But I mean, I'm still only 2.5 weeks old into this program. So
You're such a baby.
they're probably very unwarranted because Kamal texted me and I was like, well, when do I start seeing and feeling changes in my body? And you even said the other day, you're like, damn, Renee, it's only week 2. And I'm like going, oh yeah, it feels like I've been doing this forever.
So it's not a bad question, because if you think it, other people are thinking the same thing. And I know that's been a question that is asked multiple times. So here's in our experience, you are going to feel results before you'll ever see results, right? Like the first things you probably will start noticing once you get through the like being a little bit sore and uncomfortable and kind of like figuring things out, is you're going to start to notice that you're going to have a little bit more energy, or hopefully we will start to notice that you're going to have a little bit more energy, right? You're going to notice that you're moving better, right? That you have better range of motion or less pain. You're going to notice things like that before you ever start noticing that your body is changing from a size perspective, right? So, and that's one of the reasons why we hate scales, is because people get attached to the idea that this stupid number on this electronic device gives them some kind of information about the value of them as a person, when it really, that number only tells us how much force you exert on the earth based off of gravity and mass. It doesn't tell us anything other than that. So, and it's so up and down and variable, right? Like you could weigh yourself right now and go and drink a glass of water and you weigh 2 pounds heavier. You didn't just drink 2 pounds worth of water, right? Like there's so many things that go in it. And in the result thing, like everybody thinks results should look like this, right? Like I'm going to start here and then I'm going to go here. But in reality, it kind of looks like this, right? Like does all of this, right? And it's really frustrating and annoying. And that's why we spend so much time like telling, like, remember your why. Think about why you started this to begin with. Because if you have a really good reason for why you're doing this, then this stuff becomes less frustrating. It's just, you're just dealing with it, right? Second, we want to look at that vision of where we're going, right? We want to remember why we started, but we also want to see where we're going. Because if you have that vision of where what we're trying to achieve, then all of the frustrations that happen throughout the time, when things in life come up and your job gets busy and your husband gets demanding and your kids get demanding and all of that stuff happens, it still allows you to continue to move forward, right? Even if it's not at the same pace, right? The key is we always have to be moving forward. We want to get 1% better today than we were yesterday. We want to stay consistent. We want to continue to do the things that we're doing, because if you're not consistent, and you and I talked about this a lot when you first came in, is the lack of consistency on anything is what keeps people from seeing ultimate long-term results. So what I would recommend is start thinking like and that's the other reason why we talk about bright spots all the time, right? Like we want you to start to pay attention to the small things, the things that aren't clothes size related or scale related, right? Like we want you to pay attention to what are some of the things that you're starting to notice, right? Are your bowel movements more frequent, right? Everybody laughs about that, but that's a positive thing, right? That's a better thing, is to have a better operating GI tract, right? Are you able to fall asleep a little bit easier at night? Are you waking up feeling more refreshed, right? Are you feeling less pain? Are you, there's so many different things that people take for granted, they don't really think about, but those are the things that really matter in life as we get older versus what number the scale says you weigh, right? Like ultimately, if you felt good and you looked the way you wanted to look, does it really matter what the scale would say? Like if the scale said you weighed 250 pounds, but you were banging in a bikini, would you care? Probably not, right? Like, no, nobody would, right? But for some reason, especially females, they've been conditioned from childhood to like to attach the value of themselves to this stupid number on a scale. So we want to break through that. I keep joking, but I think we might start doing it. We're going to start making you guys bring your scales to the gym. We're going to mount them on the wall, and that's how you guys are going to get to look at your scale, not at home. And if we find out you bought another one, then we're coming to your house like old school style, and we're going to like take it from you in the middle of the night. Not really.
Oh Lord, honey.
Not really, but like figuratively. Does that answer your question? I mean, any others? Do you have any follow-ups?
No, that's perfect. I mean, I just, we talked a lot about my ability to like self-sabotage. And so I get to a certain point and then I'm like, oh, I'm so tired, or I'm so sore, or I'm like, oh, I'll do it tomorrow. And then I start excuses, and then the next thing you know, I'm not going at all. So far I'm good. I mean, this morning was a big deal for me because I was there at 5 and I feel good today. I'm tired, I'll tell you that, but I got it out of the way. So I don't have to now go, oh shit, I got it,
Yep.
I got
remember those I am statements, right? Remember those things that you're saying. This is who I'm going to become. This is the person that I want to be when I'm there. Those statements are powerful, right? They have a lot of power for you if you use them, if you repeat them, if you think about them, right? And that's the thing that's your beacon that's going to allow you to get there. So use those to your advantage. Don't just forget about them. Like those are there. We do that because we know how powerful it can be if you keep the end in mind and you know where you're going. And then you start to exhibit those things in real life or in your current life. Cool.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. So I've answered your guys' questions. Let's go to the ones that people sent me, and we can go into these. All right. So question number 1, are thinner heels or soles on athletic shoes important or preferred for walking or training? And what are the negative effects of thicker heels and soles? All right. If anybody knows me for any length of time, you'll know that one of my pet peeves are shoes worn in the gym, the types of shoes. So let's talk about shoes. These are my shoes. Here's a couple of things about my shoes that are really important to pay attention to. One, there's what's called a 0 drop on the shoes. And what that means is that a lot of shoes will lift the heel up and you're going to have a drop from your heel to the ground, right? These shoes have 0 drop. Why is that important? Well, most people have overactive calf muscles that force their ankle to go into what's called plantar flexion, or toe pointing down all the time. And the reason why that matters is because when you're in this position for long periods of time, your calf muscle gets tight and doesn't allow your ankle to go into what's called dorsiflexion, right? So we're in plantar flexion, we can't go into dorsiflexion, right? Why does that matter? Well, because in order to do a squat a proper way, you have to be able to go into dorsiflexion for your knees to move forward, for you to be able to drop your hips down and to go into that squat. Now, that doesn't mean that it's just for when you're in the gym. That's for everyday life. When you squat down to pick something up, If you can't drop your hips down and let your knees move forward, then what happens is you compensate and you bend over at the waist. Now, when you pick something up, all of that weight is in your lower back. So that's really important. So low drop shoes or zero drop shoes are really important. The second thing about these shoes is how wide the toe box is. So I know the question was about soles, but we're going to talk about toe box for a second too. Shoes, if you look at most shoes, are not foot shaped. If you look at your foot, if you were to draw an outline of your foot on a piece of paper and then put your shoe over the top of it, you're going to notice that your foot is wider than the shoe is, because shoes tend to push our toes together. They jam them in then, right? And what happens then is we're not able to spread our toes out the way we're supposed to when we move, when we squat, when we lift, when we do anything. And that affects the ability, or our body's ability to create a foundation on the ground, right? And the less of a foundation we have, the less of our ability to generate or transfer force through the body, through the rest of the body becomes. So we want to have something with a wide toe box that allows us to spread our toes out. And the other thing is, like, when our toes are being pushed together, it starts to create hammer toes. It can create bunions. It's not a natural position for your toes to be jammed together whatsoever. So heel wise, low heels for lifting primarily. I don't like big, thick, cushy soles for when you're in the gym, because you don't want to be like you're lifting on pillows, right? You want to have a foundation. You want to have solid ground. You want to have stability, unless we're trying to create instability, but then we can put you on a Bosu ball or the foam pad. So you want a flat sole. Now, for walking or running or something like that, having a little bit bigger, thicker sole is beneficial, especially because most of the time we're going to be on asphalt or concrete, and there is zero give in asphalt and concrete. So all of the force is generated upwards through the spine. So a thicker, cushier sole is going to absorb some of that impact when you're running. There are a lot of people that swear by like the barefoot shoes, like shoes like this. They're considered a barefoot shoe, or like the shoes called Vibram 5 Fingers that have like the toes in there. I don't recommend running in those unless you've been doing it for a long time. It's really hard on your body, especially, again, running on concrete or asphalt is really hard. So, yeah, I think that answers most of the question, right? What's the negative effects of thicker, higher soles or shoes? Again, it just mostly because it lifts your heel up, puts you in an elevated heel position, which means that you are in a plantar flex position in your ankle all the time, and it affects your biomechanics of all the movements that you do. Any comments, concerns, questions on that, girls?
No, that was great.
Okay. You like my shoes? So nice.
Yes, Josh, your shoes are nice. Now, all of that logic, thank you very much. This is why we don't wear shoes. But
yeah,
at another time, let's talk about running shoes. When I start running again, I need to get the proper shoes. I don't want my back to hurt anymore on my foot. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, you got to stop wearing like cowboy boots. Like, you got to get like wider toe everything. Okay. Next question. Oh, that was Renee's question. What are the ways to reduce risk? Okay. What are some ways to reduce the risk of injury? Don't move. I mean, ways to reduce injury or the risk of injury. So there's an inherent risk in everything. It doesn't really matter what, like sitting on this couch, there is an inherent risk, although it's a lot lower. There's a risk of anything, right? So in order to minimize risk, essentially you want to prepare your body for the different types of activities that you're doing. And that's what that we talk about, like what you do in the gym is preparing your body for living outside of the gym, or doing the things that you do in everyday life or sport or things like that. Usually most people don't get hurt in the gym. Sometimes it happens, but most of the time people get hurt when they are living their life, right? Whether they bend over and pick something up and they, quote unquote, slip a disc or throw their back out, or they, slip walking down the stairs and twist their ankle or their knee, or they fall, or, you know, all these kinds of things. So ways of reducing risk: the more muscle you have, the harder it is, you know, the harder it is to kill you, no matter what. So the more muscle, the better, the more strength you have, the better you're able to resist and to prevent injury in the event of a fall or an accident, right? Second, the stronger you are, the more muscle you have, the faster you're able to recover typically from those like things. So an easy way to think about this is like, as we age, everybody has heard like after the age of 35, you start losing X percentage of muscle every single year. So that is not because you're just getting older. You don't lose muscle just because you age. You lose muscle because you stop moving and doing the same things that you did when you were younger. So I used to work at a retirement community. I did it for like 7 years. I taught a strength training class right out of college. And you would see this interesting decline in the residents. They would move in, they would move around just fine, and then they would start to decline in health because they literally stop moving. I mean, all they do all day is sit down and eat and watch TV and crochet and eat some more, and that's all they do. And then they stop even walking around. They got like motorized wheelchairs to drive them around all the time. So they lose muscle, and then what happens is you lose muscle, you lose balance, you lose coordination. Somebody falls. Now you have less muscle to prevent the fall. Your bone density is lower because you're not using your body as much. So your body doesn't need to have a high, thick bone density. You break something and your recovery time is either really, really long or it kills you. So the best way to reduce the risk of injury or any kind of injury is to prepare yourself the right way, right? So practicing proper form, doing the things that you need to do in the gym is going to prepare your body for handling the stresses of everyday life. So I don't know if that answers the question exactly the way she wanted me to, but that's the answer she gets. Okay. Number 4, what can I do to keep my posture good throughout the day? So this is a fun one, because posture is one of those things that everybody knows that they need to practice good posture, but 99% of people just don't, because it's way too easy to do this, or to be on your computer, or to drive in your car, or to sit, right? So posture is more than just shoulders. It's more than just hips. It's all of the functions of the body. If we were to look at a person that's standing up, we call the different parts that we look at kinetic chain checkpoints, right? So kinetic means movement, and a chain is all linked together. So how your body moves, and it's all linked together into one, right? So we look at the ankles, we look at the knees, we look at the hips, we look at the spine, the shoulders, and the head and neck, right? So we look to see all that kind of stuff. So the most common postural deformations are what's known as kyphosis, right? Kyphosis is like a rounded shoulder. So if you were to look at somebody and they're kind of hunched, that's kyphosis. That means that the upper back has an excessive arch or roundness to it. That's largely attributed to overactive pectoralis minor and major muscles. So the chest muscles, they get overactive because we sit with our shoulders hunched forward, right? So when our shoulders are hunched forward, these muscles shorten and they continue to pull our shoulders forward. And then at the same time, all those muscles on my back, they get stretched out and they get weak. So they're not able to hold my shoulders back the way they're supposed to. And then when you start looking at like lower back, excessive arch of the lower back is called lordosis. And that's where you have an anterior pelvic tilt, where if you were to look at somebody, again, their pelvis from the side, their pelvis is tilted forward, right? I like to give the analogy of a bucket of water, right? And if the pelvis is a bucket of water and they have an anterior pelvic tilt, means that the water is dumping out to the front, if that makes sense. So you want to kind of flatten that pelvis out, rotate it posteriorly towards the back a little bit, and even out that water on top. And that's caused a lot from sitting, because we sit for hours and hours and hours and hours. And when we sit in this forward flex position, our hip flexors get shortened, right? The muscles that cause the hips to flex, they get shortened and they get tight. And again, whatever position that you spend a lot of time in, your brain starts to think, oh, that's the position I'm supposed to be in all the time. So it will change the structure of your body, the soft tissue, to allow you to stay in that position easier, right? So if we sit in a forward flex position, our hip flexors get shortened, our glute muscles on the backside get stretched out and they get weak. And then when we need to use those muscles, when we stand up and we're in an extended hip position and we need to do something like a squat or a hinge, then our body naturally wants to go back to that forward flex seated position. So how do I fix posture? First and foremost, it's awareness. You got to be aware of what your posture is, right? You got to know what your problems are or what your problem areas are. And then you got to look at what are the areas that are causing my problems? How can I potentially change my environment to make it more conducive to have better posture, right? So one way, if you're sitting for long periods of time, is to get a standing desk, right? So you can raise that desk up, you can stand for a while, you can lower it back down, you can sit for a while. That's one way there. Upper body wise, it's, once you know that you got it, you can start to work on releasing some of the tension in the chest muscles, strengthening the muscles in the back. Hey, Kay, come on. Can you get these? That's the big one. How's it going, guys? I hope that again answers the question. So we want to stretch the tight muscles. We want to strengthen the weaker muscles in the back, the ones that get stretched out. And then the last one, different kinds of cardio. Oh, I already answered that question. Okay. All right, guys. Any follow-ups to any of those answers, girls?
You're the best, Josh.
Not for me. That was awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, guys. I appreciate you guys for asking questions. These are fun. I like answering them. Obviously, if there's any follow-ups or any additional questions you guys have that you want me to clarify anything that I said, I would be happy to do another video or respond in any way. Obviously, you feel free to text, shoot us an email, ask me in the gym, whatever. Other than that, that's our office hours for January. And I want to thank everybody for coming. Oh, you're not in the car now. Where are you at? You at the office?
Now I'm shopping. Sorry. I have to get a gift for my son or my grandson, so I'm shopping.
Nice.
I'm listening though.
All right. Love it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Josh.
All right.
All
Bye,
right,
ladies.
Bye.